I do my rankings a quarter mile at a time. What's up, everybody? Well, we've got a new Fast and Furious movie to talk about. F9 The Fast Saga was released to theaters this past weekend. If you have not seen my full-on review, you can check that out. I'll try to put a card up here, but I have reviewed the past 3 or 4 of these movies on this channel, and I have always been a fan of this franchise. You know, it's funny, there's been a big shift in Fast and Furious fandom. This movie franchise kicked off when I was in junior high, and back then, it was all about the teenage girls. They all wanted Vin Diesel's muscles, they all wanted Paul Walker's good boyish looks, and as a guy, you kind of had to just stick to like, oh, I like cars, that's why I like this movie. It was almost taboo. Now that has flipped to where this is totally the bro movie to go check out with your friends every single time they release one, and sometimes you gotta drag your girlfriend there or your wife to check it out with you, so it's been a long ride. It's been a long ride for those of us that have been around for the entire time. But we have 10 movies in the Fast and the Furious franchise to talk about now. That's 9 main films, as well as the spin-off from a couple of years ago, Hobbs and Shaw. Gonna rank them all worst to best, starting right now. So, number 10 for me, the bottom of the barrel, and to be quite honest, the only movie in this entire list that I honestly think is just a bad film. Number 10, unfortunately, is gonna go to the new kid on the block, and that's F9, The Fast Saga. I thought this movie was terrible. Was it miserable to watch? No, but it's a movie that I will probably never watch again unless I'm binging the entire franchise, and I will be dreading it through all 9 films to get to the end of it. F9, The Fast Saga takes everything that you think you want from this franchise, but just goes way, way too far with it. You have unbelievable stunts, unbelievable invulnerable characters, which I know you could say that about the last 3 or 4, but this movie takes it about 10 steps even beyond the last film, to the point where you're watching the entire thing and there's no investment whatsoever. There's no stakes. You cannot believe a single second, a single frame of this movie, because there's absolutely there's no drama, there's no tension, there's no fear whatsoever that these characters are even gonna walk away with a scratch, let alone one of them die or get seriously injured. You have no investment because you know they are going to be impenetrable. They are made of steel, and whatever the hell they wanna do in this movie, they're gonna do it with ease, like they're walking through a door, and I don't get invested in that. From the opening frame of this movie all the way through to the end credits, I was bored shitless. And for the amount of shit that was blowing up on screen and cars zooming by and bullets flying and fists flying, there's no reason why a movie like this should be boring. But it was because there was just no investment for me. You have the family, the core characters, all of them are back, but you don't really feel like any of them are even real people anymore. And it almost undermines all of the greatness of the previous movies because it just felt so lazily thrown together. It felt like somebody went into a boardroom and said, okay, what do people online want? Okay, they want us to go to space. All right, we'll do that. All right, what's somebody else want? Han's got to come back. All right, fuck it, that makes no sense, but we'll make it happen. All right, what else we got to do? Bigger stunts? Did you see the 8th movie? Okay, bigger stunts, okay. To hell with logic, gravity, all that shit, just throw it out the window, just make it look cool. These guys are fucking idiots, they'll eat up anything. That's honestly how I felt watching this movie. I felt like the studio, the filmmakers, and even Justin Lin, who has directed some of the best of this franchise, it just felt like they didn't care. It felt like they didn't care, they were just gonna put whatever was out there because they knew it was gonna make money, and for me, as a fan of this franchise, that was insulting to me, so. Rant over. I did not enjoy this movie whatsoever. I don't imagine it's going to get better on repeat viewings. It might even get worse on repeat viewings. If you love it for how ridiculous and stupid it is, and you can even go farther, God bless you. Enjoy the ride for the next 1 or 2 movies. For me, I'm getting out of the car now. Coming in at number 9, which was my worst whenever I did this ranking the last time, which now looks a lot better in retrospect, is Fate of the Furious. Now, the biggest problem with this movie is that it has a giant Paul Walker-sized hole in its heart. I don't understand for the life of me, aside from greed and monetary reasons, why they continued this series after Furious 7. I think that was a perfect send-off for this franchise. It has the perfect ending. It brings everything full circle. There was literally nothing left hanging at the end of that movie. And then you get Fate of the Furious and they say, okay, what else can we do? Let's make Dom a bad guy and everybody's got to go after Dom. And the problem with that is that if you don't have Paul Walker in this movie, Now you don't even have Dom with the characters, with the rest of the family. And they're good characters, but they're not strong enough characters to carry a movie without one of those two leaders of the group. So the whole movie with them being on their own and having to carry the hero side of this, while all the while you know for a fact that Dom's a good guy, but there's just something weird going on. You don't believe for a second that he's turned bad and he's went against the family. Charlize Theron, good villain. I mean, she's a great actress, so, you know, she's a positive in here. Of course, there's some good standout goofy moments, especially with Hobbs and Shaw. This is the movie that pretty much guaranteed that they were going to get their own spin-off, so they're entertaining. But this does, to a much lesser degree, what I didn't like about F9, which is that they just make everything so bombastic and so over the top that it becomes stupid. There was always a small tether to reality in all of the Fast and Furious movies up to this point. There was ridiculous, huge, gigantic, absolutely impossible stunts, but there was always an inkling of, well, maybe it could happen. Maybe they could jump across skyscrapers in a car if they had a good enough car. Maybe. You get to F8, and that's just gone. That's just out of here. I mean, we're pushing missiles away from submarines with The Rock's giant biceps, so that's the kind of movie you're in for. Is it still dumb fun? Yes, I could still watch this one and still be along for the ride with my brain shut off. It didn't quite get to the F9 level yet, but to me, this was definitely where the franchise jumped the shark, and I think that they should have stopped at 7. Coming in at number 8 is going to be the spin-off Hobbs and Shaw. Fun movie, not necessary, and it gets very, very, very silly. Not to the point where the stunts are silly. I mean, you've got The Rock hanging onto a truck, hanging onto a chain, pulling the helicopter down. I mean, and you believe it for a split second just because it's The Rock and that's the type of character that he is. It is fun getting that back and forth between Jason Statham and The Rock whenever they're riffing on each other, and, you know, it's kind of that typical buddy cop scenario where they don't really like each other, but they kind of have to work with each other, then they grow to actually like each other by the end. We've seen it 1,000 times. This movie does absolutely nothing different with that subgenre, but it is fun. It is entertaining. Idris Elba as this cybernetic superhuman, pretty cool villain. A little out there for this franchise, but nonetheless, they pretty much blown the doors off, and now who knows what is out of reach with this franchise. But fun movie, mindless action. Again, pushing it a little bit too far for me, but I can still turn my brain off and enjoy this, and it is carried completely by the two leads. Number 7 is Too Fast, Too Furious. Now, I've kind of grown to appreciate this movie a little bit more over time. This used to be the worst of the franchise to me, no holds barred. Absolutely no contest, this was the silliest one. Now in retrospect, it's not even close. Too Fast, Too Furious is a lot more of a flashier, more neon, a little bit more tongue-in-cheek version of the first film. They're still very much focused on street racing here. You get the incorporation of the character Roman Pierce by Tyrese, and his interaction and his kind of camaraderie and his chemistry with Paul Walker is very good, and there's a lot of good humorous moments by that character and by their interactions. I like the villain in this, and I think it has some of the more memorable sequences in here where they're trying to, you know, race those two cars for pink slips, and Paul Walker's got to like play chicken with the guy. For some reason, those sequences stand out to me because I watched them as a kid, and for some reason, revisiting this movie just has a little bit more nostalgia now than it used to 3-4 years ago. But it is silly. This is a movie where it's not taking itself seriously anymore. It's not as, you know, it's not going for that gritty realism that we kind of had with the first movie, going for that a little bit more danger for the characters. You definitely feel like they're all just kind of having fun along the way, which, if you're on board for that, it's a fun movie, just not as grounded, I'll say, as some of the early chapters of Fast and Furious. Number 6 is going to be Furious 7. Now, I know this is a fan favorite. This might be a little bit controversial having it this low. Like I've said, aside from the last movie, I really enjoy all of these films. So even at number 6, I'm at like a 4-star film right now. Furious 7, to me, it's not fair really to criticize this movie for the things that I have against it, because they did the absolute best that they could with the circumstance of the sudden tragic death of Paul Walker. And I think for the quality of the film that we got, I think that they did a magnificent job working around that. But unfortunately, the film is always going to feel like they were working around that, and there's no way to watch it without knowing that. There's some really good stunts here. You have the introduction of Shaw, played by Jason Statham, who is arguably the best villain in this franchise, and him kind of being on this revenge kick towards them is a very good storyline to have for what I think should have been the final film. And to me, James Wan, starting to get a lot of J's. James Wan brings a nice little style to this movie. I don't think that it totally feels like a James Wan movie. They definitely have that template that Justin Lin set that he definitely had to work within, but there is certain flavors to this where you can tell a new filmmaker has come in to breathe in some new life. I think that there's some good standout sequences with all of the characters for the most part, but it is very distracting seeing how they've had to work around Paul Walker, how a lot of it is CGI. He looks very shiny in some scenes, and my eyes are always directed towards it. There's lines of dialogue that are recycled throughout the film by Brian, and there's even some sequences, some stunts where you can tell that it's a CGI face. So, like I said, it's unfair to hold this movie accountable for stuff like that, but it always distracts me. It always brings my experience down a little bit because the whole time all I'm thinking about is Paul Walker's not really here. But you know, there's again, this is the movie that pushed it as far as you could possibly go while still holding onto a slight tether to reality. Like when you get to where they're jumping across skyscrapers in that car, that's about as far as I'm willing to go, even with my brain completely shut off. So this is where they've got all the way to the finish line without crossing over for me. So I can still really enjoy this, and I still think that this is a really great conclusion for the franchise. And depending on whether or not they get this car back on track with Fast 10 and inevitably Fast 11, this might be where mental canon for me ends. This might be where I stop my Fast and Furious binges. Number 5 is going to be Fast and Furious, the fourth film, the one that really kind of got this franchise back on track and set everything up for Fast 5 to knock it out of the park. I have a lot of fond memories of seeing this in theaters with my best friend. I was in college, it was a shitty year, and we went to go see a couple of movies throughout that year. Fast and Furious was one of them, and we just had a blast the entire time. Seeing these characters back together was great. There's some really good action sequences, namely the opening heist sequence from the beginning of the film, I think is still one of the standout sequences in this franchise that over the top, but still that very grounded realism type of stunts that we got in the first 4 or 5 films. And I do think that even though there's certain sequences here, like the tunnels, that definitely don't look great, they look a little bit cheap, not the best villain in the world, not even really the greatest story in the world, the fact that we got these characters back together in an organic way and got this franchise back on track in the direction that all of us wanted to see, I really enjoy revisiting this film. I mean, it's a first chapter for me in a great trilogy of 4, 5, and 6, but it's a necessary chapter in there. It's not the biggest, it's not the most badass, but it's necessary. Number 4 is Fast and Furious 6. Now, this does pretty much, I'd say 80% of what I love my number 1 for, but this is where they really started to get silly with things. This is where they really started to push it to where I started noticing how ridiculous the stunts were. I mean, when you got Letty and Dom jumping across the highway to save each other, when you have a runway that goes on for like 40 miles in the finale and you're not supposed to ask any questions about that, it starts to get a little bit silly. But where this movie shines is the cast coming together and having some great standout moments. I mean, you got that fight scene with Tyrese and Han taking on that guy, which is just a hilarious, awesome fight scene. You got great interaction between The Rock and Dom and Brian now that they're kind of on the same side. You have this whole drama with Letty being alive and she's a bad guy, and you know, how are we going to get her back on our side, and what's the explanation for how she was actually alive and not dead from the 4th film. There's a lot of good drama in this movie that makes the story side of things, back when they still cared about story, very natural as a sequel to Fast 5. And I really like Owen Shaw as a villain too. I think you could argue he's the second best villain in this franchise. Maybe even some people could say that he's even better than Jason Statham. Pretty tight race, but I think he's a great villain. Even Gina Carano as kind of his surprise henchman, I like her placement in this. So Fast and Furious 6, absolute blast of a movie. Just gets held back a little bit from me for them really starting the silliness here. Number 3, I know I'm gonna be one of few people that have this in the top 3, but fuck it. Tokyo Drift. I have always loved this movie. I don't know what it is about it that just, it holds a special place in my heart. I know within the franchise, this is the black sheep. This is the one that people like to forget about. This is the one that you could easily pretty much skip over and still know exactly what's going on in this franchise, aside from who the hell are these weird rocket scientists that show up in the middle of Fast 9. Tokyo Drift for me is the movie that if you like the street racing side of this franchise and the early parts of this franchise, to me this is the best one. This is the best one that really kind of captures that underground racing. I love the drift scenes, like they're awesome stunts. I love Lucas Black in the main role in here. He's a guy that I've always liked whenever he was a child actor. Seeing him come back and do this, I really enjoyed him. I like his interactions even with, is it Bow Wow or Little Bow Wow? I don't know what he goes by. That guy, he's got a good interaction with him. I even like him in his romantic interest in here that kind of gets him put on this collision course with the main gangster. And of course, this movie shines a lot because we got the introduction of Han, which I would argue is most people's favorite character in this franchise, maybe aside from Dom and Brian. Han is awesome, and this movie is really his movie where he gets to shine a lot. I don't have too many negatives aside from the lower budget, really. This was one that you could tell they were kind of heading towards straight to DVD at this point before Fast and Furious put it back on track. But for me, it's a very small negative. I really do enjoy Tokyo Drift a lot. And now we're at the top two, and we have one of the greatest action films of all time, in my opinion, and a very nostalgic piece of my preteen childhood. And number two for me is gonna be the original, The Fast and Furious. Now, aside from the fact that I'm still genuinely shocked that whoever holds the rights to Point Break has not sued the fuck out of whoever holds the rights to the Fast and Furious franchise, it is a blatant ripoff of Point Break, beat for beat. Aside from that, I really enjoyed this film. Even as a kid, even back when it was kind of taboo, that was the teenage girls movie that I'm not supposed to like. Even then, I really liked it. I loved Paul Walker ever since he first came onto the scene. I really liked Vin Diesel back when he started out. I'm not the biggest fan of Vin Diesel in the world since his career outside of Fast and Furious hasn't been all that great. But when he was coming up as the new action star, I was on board. I was drinking the Kool-Aid, so I liked him. And having that street racing side of things to where it really does feel like a movie that's grounded in the underground racing circuits, while at the same time having that cops and criminals, that classic story there, as well as that great storyline that Point Break set out where the undercover cop is trying to find the bad guys and then befriends and falls in love with the bad guys accidentally. I love the story. I love the introduction of these characters. I think there's really good racing scenes. And aside from just retroactively seeming very weird within the franchise because of how huge everything gets later on, I just think it's still a very enjoyable movie to go back and watch. Hell, I just watched it 20 minutes ago. I just rewatched it for the first time in like a year or two, and I still have a lot of nostalgic love for this movie. So all the criticisms you can throw at it, I totally understand, totally agree. The nostalgia blinders are on, and I still think that this is one of the best in the franchise. But number one for me, and it's not even close. All the other movies are still at the starting line. This movie has already crossed the finish, parked, and went on to take a lunch, okay? Fast 5 is the greatest Fast and Furious movie by a country mile. To me, it's not even close. Like, as much as I really genuinely enjoy all the other movies minus one on this list, Fast 5 is on a totally different level. This is within my top 50 action films of all time. It's in my top 100 films of all time, I believe. I mean, this Fast 5 to me gets everything perfect about this franchise. It nails everything that this thing has potential for. It's got awesome action sequences. It has great characters. It brings the entire family back together. All the side characters from all the other movies are brought back, and they are at their best here. I think that it builds upon what Fast and Furious sets up in a great way. And I like even the storyline, the way that they kind of switch things over to a heist film to where it doesn't feel like they're secret agents yet. It doesn't feel like they're superheroes yet. This was the time when everything was perfect, where it didn't feel silly. People have their criticisms about the final action sequence where they're driving and they're pulling the safes with their car. But again, that action sequence to me still has a tether to reality. Is it ridiculous? Is it over the top? Is it impossible? You're damn right. But you can still believe it as you're watching the film. You can still cross your mind to that little bit of disbelief and get there to where you just enjoy this for how kick-ass the sequence is. And man, you want to talk about giving this franchise just a gigantic shot of fucking Viagra. The Rock entering into this franchise, and at the time, the biggest that we ever saw this guy, and being this antagonist for these characters and being this very physical threat to Vin Diesel, who at the time was kind of the big guy on the block. that makes this movie. The fight scene between those two characters to me is still one of the greatest and most brutal fight scenes of all time. I love this fucking movie. There's absolutely nothing negative that I have to say about it. I enjoy the shit out of every single rewatch, and I will continue to rewatch this. And I'm telling you right now, if they could even get close to how great this movie is with one or two more Fast and Furious movies, then you will end on the highest note possible. Fast 5, without a doubt, number one. So what do you guys think of the Fast and Furious franchise? Are you fans of this franchise? Do you think that it's ridiculous? Are you a fan of the early street racing side but don't like the more action-centric superhero side, the super spy stuff? Or are you like most people and have it flipped where you weren't really on board with this franchise until about Fast 5 and now you love every single one? Well, let me know your thoughts down below. Give me your ranking in the comments. And like I said, if you want to check out my reviews, I believe I have reviews for Fast 8, Hobbs & Shaw, and F9. I don't think I was on YouTube when Furious 7 came out, so you'll have all those reviews that you can check out. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button so you can check out more movie reviews. I've got the Black Widow review coming tomorrow, I believe, so definitely hit the subscribe button for that. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.